Welcome to episode 3 of the Suburban Canine Podcast. Once again, I'm Matt Covey. We also have Nelson Medrano. I feel like we need a verbal introduction now instead of a fist pump because a lot of people are just listening on Spotify. So
Hello.
like, hey, what? Yes, like that. That was good. And we also have Alexander Chadish.
Hello.
Oh, we got a wave and a hello, a sensual.
A sultry hello at that.
Sultry is the word I was looking for. Not sure if this is your first episode or if you've listened to the others, but if you enjoy it, please take the time to review it. I don't know if you're on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever, but tell people the show doesn't suck. Tell them it's cool. Tell them we know stuff about dogs. That really does make a difference for us. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, drop a comment, whatever. All of that stuff helps, and we appreciate it. Well, we are excited for this episode. We're going to cover, the main thing we'll cover today is talking through how to introduce your new baby to your dog. We get this question a lot and we love helping people with it. And we're also going to play a couple fun games, play 60-second solutions if you're familiar with that. Nelson and I will each have 60 seconds to offer a solution to some sort of complex dog training problem. But without further ado, I think we're ready to jump in. And I think Nelson's going to cover a lot of this today because introducing babies to dogs is like his forte. Nelson, you have what, 11 kids? 12?
It's like 11 kids, 11 dogs. Integrated them quite nicely.
Yeah.
20 cats.
So you're going for a dozen, I feel like, kids and dogs,
That's
right?
the goal. I feel like it's a solid goal.
You know, all joking aside, Nelson and I both have kids. In real life, you have 3 kids,
Yes.
I believe, not 11. And I have 3 as well. So we've both got a lot of experience introducing dogs to kids. And we both also enjoy harder breed dogs. So we're generally not introducing just Goldens or Labs to kids. We've done this with, what you would call like a tougher breed. So I think there's a lot of good stuff to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
Nelson, do you want to start off? There's so many ways we could go here, but what's running through your mind? What would you like to talk about?
The first thing I'd love to talk about is my first hot take, which is if you put down your baby in a car seat and let your dogs run up and sniff it, I feel like someone should take either your dogs or your baby away and not let you have them. Because that's
I agree 1,000%. Can you clarify? I'm not really like pop culture. What does hot take mean?
A hot take, I think, is just when you're pissing everybody off. That's how I use it, at least.
Okay. Well, then I agree. Total hot take.
Uh-huh.
Don't let your kid or your dogs run up to your kid in a car seat to meet them, for sure.
Yeah, and one of the big things is, the concept behind it, I guess, is giving the dogs a chance to sniff and familiarize themselves with your baby. And my solution to that is it's none of your business. It's my baby, not yours. And so what I would be doing is actually creating boundaries, not, just letting a free-for-all actually happen. So when I bring kids, my babies into the house for the first time, the chances of a dog getting close enough to like actually sniff their body is 0, less than 0, if that. Just because a lot of accidents happen, and it's not biting or eating, but it's stepping on them, it's jumping on them, it's, anything like that. And car seats are designed for cars, but not dogs jumping into them.
Totally agree, Nelson, without a doubt. So when we have the worries, you mentioned it's not just biting and eating, right? It's also stepping on, but it is also biting, right? We've got to worry about that too. I think one thing I'd like to jump into quickly is, we could back up, and I think we should, right? To how do you prepare to bring a baby into your home? Because if you're at the hospital and your baby's there ready to come home and you're like, all right, what do we do? You're 3-4 months behind. You should have been doing some stuff all along. So I think we can back up. And one thing I want to address really soon is the idea of bringing a hat or a blanket home from the hospital that smells like the baby. And I tell every client to do it, but I also tell them, don't put much stock in this. That's one of those things. It's kind of a feel-good thing. And there's probably trainers out there right now that are like, you're a knucklehead or idiot. Like it's incredible. But think about it. Think about it logically. Let's say your dog is dog aggressive and they want to kill other dogs. And you bring home a blanket that smells like a dog. they're not going to try to kill the blanket. They're going to smell it and wag their tail, right? They're going to sniff it and wag their tail. So you're going to be like, okay, she's smelling the dogs. Then you do that 5 days in a row, and you bring a dog home, that same dog that blanket smelled like. If your dog is dog aggressive, it's going to attack that dog still. So what did you do? Really nothing, right? So now you have a dog in the house that, like, your dog has smelled before from a blanket. It sees the dog, and if it's dog aggressive, it will attack that dog still. It would do whatever it would have done before. So I tell clients to do it, but I tell them this isn't going to fix anything. This is like, it's a tiny, tiny change. And I think you should do it because it's easy and it's kind of fun. But also when I do it, there's some steps we take. We don't just bring it home and let the dog smell it. So I make it a lot more productive than that, which I think we'll jump into in a few minutes as we get into, like, how we actually bring the baby into the home. So Nelson, I mean, do you want to lead off with things you would be doing a month before?
Yeah.
Things you would be teaching the dog?
Just to jump on the sniffing stuff, I feel exactly the same way that you do, that it's so easy, it's worth doing. And if there's a 0.01 chance that it makes things go easier because of how easy it is, it's worth doing. But that's certainly, that's not what I'm putting all of my trust into, right? There's way more training that goes into that. And like you said, a month ahead of time, something that I'd be working a ton on is item discernment. It's getting the dogs to understand that they have to stay away from certain things. What I work on a lot with clients and with my own dogs is bringing a new dog toy or even like a baby doll or something like that and leaving it weird places and teaching the dogs that they can't go up to it. Just because it's new, they're going to want to investigate it, but that's what we're trying to work against. Just getting them used to not everything is their business.
100% agreed. So to that point, we like to start with a baseline of training, right? If your dog can't heel and they can't sit and stay and come, do all that first. If you're trying to deal with an untrained dog and a baby, you're making everything harder than it needs to be. So get your baseline first. And, all of our clients that we're working with are already getting that baseline. But, maybe listening, you're not one of our clients. You don't have that baseline. If your dog can't hold a downstay, your life is going to be much harder with that baby. So get your baseline, get some proper training done first. And then I would for sure move to what Nelson was saying. And I think we could expand on that a little bit. I like to bring in anything the dog is excited about and practice having the dog leave it alone. That's the most simple way I can explain it. And I think that was your point a minute ago, Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
There's a similar one. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a toy. I don't care if it's food, whatever. Something your dog is excited about. And I want you to work on keeping the dog away from it. And you need to build up that muscle memory, and so does your dog. When you bring a baby home and you're tired and, sleep deprived and stressed, if you don't have some sort of mechanism to tell your dog get or back or leave it, and you're trying to teach it then, you're going to be frustrated. It's too hard. So I work on it then, and it could just be like a squeak toy. And you walk through the house, you're squeaking it, and if your dog's following you, you practice saying, hey, get, or whatever words you want. And basically you're claiming that object and you're saying you need to leave it alone, and then practice putting it on the couch or on the counter or on the baby, wherever, like anywhere you want to put it. On the countertop couch, it could be the floor, and make sure the dog can leave that thing alone. And right now we're talking about a toy, but it could be food. It could be anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Is essentially a leave it. I just don't always tie the word to it, but yeah, leave this thing alone and learn to get on with your life without having to investigate, everything.
Yes, for sure. Mm-hmm. I'm curious what you think about this one, Nelson. I have 3 kids for everyone listening. When my first kid was born, we established that the dogs could not go in the nursery. So we, spare bedroom was where became the nursery, and we claimed space from the dogs, and they just learned you can't go in the nursery at all. And it helped a lot for our first kid. She was colicky and cried a lot, and we were new parents, had no idea what we were doing. And it was nice to be able to set her on the ground and, for a minute or so, and know that, like, the dogs, there's no way anything could happen. They couldn't step on her, whatever, no issues could arise. The second and third kids, we relaxed that rule, and we actually got rid of it and let the dogs in the nursery. But I'd already started to trust my dogs around babies more because they'd seen a baby already, and they'd, seen a child grow. And I was also a much more competent parent at that point. Maybe not great, but better than I was. So what do you think? Do you have clients kind of claim the nursery and teach the dogs the boundary to stay out?
Yeah, I go over that, all the time. I did it myself too. Gabe was a little older. He was, I want to say, like 3 when we first got Bryn. So we didn't have to go through that with him. But then with Maggie, we certainly did. And I've kept it up with every single kid. Just their room, their nursery is nowhere that you need to be. My dogs had no problem hanging out in the doorway. If not, they just found something else to do and go hang out somewhere else. But at client's house, that's something that we work on a lot is, hey, as you're setting up the nurseries, we work on the dogs not following you into the room, because if you're about to change a diaper or something, you're not going to remember to say stay or down or place or anything like that. Just don't go in there. But we also work on that kind of stuff with everything else that goes into the living room, like a bassinet, playpens, anything like that. Just, again, getting the dogs to understand that these things are going to be around and they can't jump in or try to make their way in or play with any of the new stuff. And sometimes marking,
Yep,
right?
all
I mean,
good points.
that's another one too that I've seen is if you have a super dominant male dog, you have to be worried about them sniffing all of this new stuff and peeing on it. And so we work on that kind of stuff as well. And it's better to know what's going on now and fix it than when you're sleep deprived and 3 days into your baby being home, like you said.
Absolutely. Why don't we spend a minute talking about the worries of things that could go wrong? So when I brought my first child home, I had 2 dogs. I had a Mastiff mix that we'd rescued and a Scott type American Bulldog, who was a very intense, drivey dog. And, to me, when the risk is your child accidentally being killed, and it could be from a bite or being stepped on by a really large dog, when that's the risk you're worried about, you need to minimize that to like 0.0001, right? As low as you possibly can. Because we're not talking about the risk of like a nip to the hand, right? Like with a baby, it could be traumatic and even deadly. So I go to extremes when I'm bringing a baby into the house, and then I loosen up from there. And I could never live with myself if I didn't help a client go to extremes and something terrible happened, right? So let me tell you my worry when I was bringing my first kid home. My dog, nice dog, loved people, liked other dogs, but she was bred for personal protection. She was a tough animal. If a dog attacked her, her first thought was, let's fight. Like, she was not a back down kind of dog, right? She wouldn't look for a fight, but she wouldn't back down from one. And if any of you have ever been to a dog park and seen a fight break out, or if you've ever worked in a dog daycare, you know what I mean. When dogs hear and see weakness or pain, a lot of dogs decide to attack. And if you've never seen it, it might not make sense to you, but you see, if you're at a dog daycare or a dog park, one dog starts screaming or yelping and running, every other dog, they are chasing them and they're trying to grab that dog, and it's not pretty. So at a dog daycare, the worst thing you can have is a dog yelping in pain, because all the other, a lot of dogs go after him. So my worry always with a baby is that we don't know how a dog is going to interpret their screaming and crying and thrashing, right? Maybe they're like, oh, no big deal. Or maybe they interpret it the same way as a rabbit who is, thrashing around in the yard, that many dogs would jump on, grab, and snap its neck really quick. And nice dogs do that. We get calls from clients sometimes where like, my dog killed a rabbit. Like, should I be worried? Like, your dog's a dog, right? If the rabbit was in the yard and the dog, like, there's a lot of incredibly friendly dogs that'll grab a rabbit and snap its neck. That could happen to your baby, right? Now, I'm not trying to scare anyone, like, for no reason. The odds of that are slim. I'd give you that, but you still have to worry about that. So that was my big worry when I brought my first child home, is I don't know how my dog's going to interpret a baby. She's never seen one. Does she know it's a human? I don't know. And I'm not going to take the risk on that. So that was my big worry. With my Mastiff mix, my worry was less about, the potentially biting. My worry was stepping on. And he weighed 160 pounds. So if he stepped on a baby's neck, I mean, that could be deadly with a dog of that size, with a brand new baby who's doing tummy time or something. So those were my worries. And once again, I like to over worry, because sometimes clients will ask me, they're like, do you really think my dog would kill my baby? I'm like, no, I think the odds are insanely low. That's how I felt about my dog too. I thought the odds were insanely low, but still it's a potential. So why take the risk? So you don't have to think your dog is a killer to think they could accidentally kill your baby, right? You just have to think that your dog is a large, powerful animal. That's what you need to be thinking about.
Well, and the other thing too, like it's not always the fact of my dog is going to do something crazy. It's always good to prepare for that kind of stuff. It's certainly, a worry for me as well. But it's also just there's no downside to having more control. There's no downside at all to just being able to tell your dog to back off, or being able to tell your dog to go hang out on place while I do tummy time, or to hang out in a downstay while I play with my kids and they see, fighting for the first time, any of that kind of stuff. And so when it comes to clients and stuff like that, I just tell them, the chances of your dog doing something really stupid is slim, but the chances of your dog stealing something out of your toddler's hands in a couple of months is very, very high. And the work that we're doing here is just helping us for that time too, right? Teaching dogs to respect the babies that they will watch grow up. I mean, that's never there's never a downside, and so it's worth being as safe and paranoid, I guess. Right? I guess could be a word. It's worth being as safe as possible.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, Nelson, because when I talk to pretty much every client I ever deal with when we talk about this is really excited to make these changes. But if I ever get, a question of like, are some of these changes worth it? To your point, yeah, they're good for other things and they're not that hard. And it's kind of like putting locks on your doors. What are the odds someone's going to come in and murder you tonight if you have no locks on your door? I'd say pretty slim, right? If you leave all your doors open tonight, most likely you're not going to get murdered and have your head chopped off in your sleep. So you'll probably be fine. But why not lock your doors? Is it that hard to do? And only good can come from it. So, that's my thought is the risk is low, but it's a pretty big issue if it happens. So why not take these easy steps? Why don't we jump into, and who wants to cover this, Nelson, you or me? Maybe what do we do the day we bring the kid home? Because everything we've talked about so far is well and good, but what do we do on the second you walk through the door?
Yeah, I can take this one. For my dogs, I want them to sniff from afar. So I work on pretty hard claiming my baby, from my dogs. So I teach them that they can't get too close, usually like 5 feet or so is close enough for me. Again, I was a little bit more paranoid than maybe a lot of people were. But they didn't care. To them, after all the work that we had done, by the time I brought my first baby home, because again, my son was older by the time that we had brought Bren home as a puppy, by the time that my dogs were older and finally seeing a baby, they were used to being claimed against food and other stuff like that. So for them, it was no big deal whatsoever. But I work on that stuff. I don't want them getting too close to the bassinet. I don't want them getting too close to whoever's holding the baby. That's a big one. For me, a lot of family members, and if they're watching, I hope they don't take crazy offense, but I also don't trust you with my baby, right? And like if a dog does something stupid like cross in front of you, and I'm already a little wary of like, you're holding my baby and I will stop at nothing to make sure you don't drop it. There's no reason we need to introduce other factors. So I work pretty hard on that too. As I'm walking around with the baby, I work on the dogs, leaving me alone and clearing my way. I work on the same thing with my wife. But then I also work.
Can we get some clarification there? Like, you don't let Taylor do certain things. You claim space from Taylor. Is that what I'm hearing?
I try to as much as possible.
Like, Taylor, you cannot come in my office. Is that?
It's like, what, the bassinet, you need to stay 5 feet away from that. Don't worry about that. Although those
somehow
first couple of days, she'd be
Taylor's
happy.
claimed things from you. She's like, Nelson, you stay out of this room. It's only going to become a mess if you walk in here.
Yeah, if only we knew how true that was. And so, but as she's walking around and holding the baby, like I have to worry about my kids not my dogs coming up and sniffing feet and like sneaking little licks and whatnot, because I don't know, not that that's unsanitary, but it feels unsanitary and I'm not okay with that. So some of that stuff is a lot of the stuff that I'm working on. I also tend to, just because I can't take them for a walk. I was pretty hands-on when we first came home. I'd work on basic obedience around the house, and if nothing else, it's just good to get the dogs working again. But it's also just a way to burn them out because I wasn't planning on taking them for a walk those days. What about you?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you and I are on the same page with this because I know we've obviously talked about this over the years. There's, I'm sure, some differences, but when I bring a baby in for the first time, I'm holding the baby. Now my dogs are good, right? So now my kids are, 13, 11, and 8, but when they were babies, the dogs I had then were very well trained. So I came in and I, backed the dogs away from the door. I asked them both to sit and stay. And I just stood there for a couple minutes, right? I talked to them, like not standing awkwardly, but I talked to them and just take my time with it. And, got my wife in the house, she came in, and then, then I freed the dogs up. And of course they wanted to see the baby. And so I shooed them back a couple times and just established some control, right? And I walked through the house holding my daughter and made sure the dogs were given a respectful distance. And they were good right away. If they hadn't been, if they were too excited, if it took 10 minutes, whatever. And then I gave them each a chance to smell. But my smelling was me holding my daughter up and like gently, putting her down a little bit and letting them smell the feet, with all four on the floor, right? Their paws on the floor, like no jumping whatsoever. If that was a worry, I'd be stopping that first. Gave them a little bit of a smell, and then that was it. Like, I don't know, 5 or 10 seconds. And like, okay, guys, get back, and shooed them back. And we did that, a few times a day, let them get a little smell in. But then we had really strict rules. So, if you don't have a kid yet, like I learned all this on the fly, like when they're very young, like they can't even roll yet. Right. And I didn't know that. So like when we first got a kid and like, we put her on the couch, we'd put her to the back of the couch, like to sit next to us. Right. And she wouldn't roll off because she couldn't do that yet. And so the dogs would want to come up and smell her and I would not let them. It was months before I would let them walk up and just smell her without my permission. Once again, why not? Like better safe than sorry. So she was on the couch. They could not stick their heads on the couch and smell her while she was laying there. And, and that went on for months and months. And so the first few weeks are actually pretty easy because babies don't do anything besides eat, go to the bathroom, and cry. So there's not that much introduction you have to do, at least in my opinion. The dogs get to smell the kid once or twice a day briefly while you're holding them. I never, ever, ever let them smell when the child is not in my hands. And then we practice boundaries. If you're working on tummy time, Nelson mentioned claiming space earlier. The dogs have to keep a big distance away during tummy time. I prefer that they don't have to be in a downstay. If they have to, they have to. But, if you've done the baseline work properly, your dog should be able to be free and just know they can't come up right then. So I think the first week or two is pretty easy outside of that initial coming in the house. And that, I guess I should say, that's easy too. It's just easy to get very scared because that's the first time you're bringing the kid in. Most issues start to arise later as the child spends more time on the ground, as the child can roll, as there's more things happening.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely super easy. It is very, very helpful that they don't move. They don't make much noise. Even the noises that they make are... I kind of always assumed that full-on screaming and crying was going to happen like immediately, which wasn't the case, which was awesome. So that's definitely a good thing. But for my dogs, I was a little more structured than you were, so I did use place command a lot. I did use like the time that they got to come up to me and sniff the baby while I was holding it was probably a couple of days from the first day. But realistically, it seems like we were doing very identical things.
And then we released some of those rules, some of them through time, right? As time went on, those dogs had a very normal relationship with my children, right? As the kids got older, and were crawling, the kids would crawl over, pet the dogs, throw the toy for them, they had a normal relationship, but we take it slow and we build to that point rather than the human controls the relationship rather than the dog or should control the relationship, and a baby can't control anything, right? So it's up to you to do it. Otherwise the dog is running that relationship there. All right. There's so many things we could talk about here. I don't know how far in the future we want to go, as the kid gets older. One thing we haven't talked about yet, but very often we'll get a call from someone and a lot of times they think it's kind of a good thing. They're like, it's pretty cool. My dog is really protective of my child, and it's great because even grandma, when she holds him, the dog's watching carefully. Like, well, that's a huge problem. And they're like, why? He's being protective and making sure the baby's okay. Like, maybe, or maybe he's excited about that movement and he's thinking about jumping. It could be it could be that, but also even if he is protective, what if he jumps and bites grandma's hand while she's holding the baby? That could be your baby's skull that he accidentally bites. Or grandma could drop the baby. If the dog jumps and snaps at her, she could trip and fall, and she could break her hip and the baby could fall on their head. So that is horrible. And do you want your dog to protect the baby from someone he knows, his grandma? Probably not. So you got to stop all of that. When a client tells me that, it's like full stop. Is hot take the word? No, I don't think that's the right use. Is it, Nelson?
No, because I don't think you're pissing anybody off with this advice.
But when they tell me that, I stop everything and like, let's address that. I don't care what we were going to do today. That's what we're focusing on. And we're talking about that because that is a way more likely scenario for your baby to get seriously injured or killed than it is the dog doing it on purpose. If the dog is guarding and doesn't like other people handling the child, that's a huge potential issue.
And think about everything that we've talked about up to this point, right? Realistically, everything that we have been doing or implementing, me and you specifically, has been to establish boundary. It's to establish that there's a baseline of just, obedience in general. But it's also to prevent any obsessive behavior, because really that's what I need my dogs to know is that again, it's really none of your business. So if the baby cries, you're not going to be the one to change the diaper. So get out of my face and let me do that. But that's the same thing where a lot of people, especially when they make such a large deal out of the ritual of meeting the baby, sniffing the baby, laying right next to it while it's sleeping on things. I've seen crazy videos of like a husky jumping into the crib with I'm sure it wasn't a baby, I'm sure it was a toddler, but there's no way any of that stuff would happen. I didn't let them into the room. You let them into the crib. Like, there's a lot of obsessive behavior that comes from the fact that I have full access to this thing that makes noise. And that can I was going to say that could go good, but really, like, it could go okay at best, right? But it can go bad in a hurry. And a lot of it comes from claiming, not protective work in the fact that this is my owner, I'll protect them to the death. More like, this is my new toy that my parents brought me, and I will protect it from anybody else and bite anybody that comes close to it, that kind of stuff. And so that's the far side of what happens when you don't do what me and you have done, right? Is that they have unfettered access to this cool new thing that makes noise, and who knows what they'll do, like when they feel entitled to it.
Yeah, I like the phrase you use, this is my cool new toy, right? The dog could think that. And that's what I mean about the human controls the relationship, not the dog. Your dog does not control introductions with your baby. You do, or the baby does. So when I don't like reach out with a baby's hand and make it pat the dog on the head when the baby's like, I don't know, 6 weeks old, the baby will pet the dog when the baby is ready to pet the dog. So when the baby's 9 months old and is crawling around a lot, and I've gotten a lot more comfort with, I know my dog likes the baby, and I know my dog is not going to freak out when the baby cries because it's happened 10,000 times already. So at that point, my worries are gone of the dog not understanding it's a human child. That's my worry, like the first couple weeks.
Yeah, for sure. That
goes away quickly. Then the baby crawls over to the dog and pets him on the head. I'm cool with that because the human is controlling the relationship. So I don't want anyone to get the impression that like the baby and the dog, it's like that they never get to interact. It's the child's terms. So as the baby crawls over and starts petting the dog, I watch carefully because kids will try to bite the dog's ears and pull the dog's ears, and I stop them from doing that, right? And we establish some rules, but humans control the interaction, not the dogs. If you do that and you can master that, pretty much everything's going to be fine from there.
Yeah, a common question that I get, and so I'll kick it over to you, but it's very similar, is, well, I want my dog to love my baby. And oftentimes I'm like, I'm not stopping your dog from loving this baby. If anything, there's probably going to be more love instead of, again, obsession. But what would you say to that of, well, if you're holding so many boundaries, if you're being so strict, my dog won't learn to love my baby?
Yeah, I think I would open with my biggest priority is keeping your baby safe. So that should be and I know it's, as a parent, I know that's your biggest priority too. So your goal is to keep your baby safe. That's the most important thing. And trust me on it. Have you ever seen a person, like when I walk into a client's house, I don't look at the dog. I don't acknowledge the dog until I know him. Like, this is a first time client. Don't look at the dog. Don't talk to him. Act like it's not there. And basically every time they're like, why does he like you so much? He doesn't normally like people this much. You must have an aura. I'm like, it's not a magic aura. I'm just ignoring him, right? I'm not making eye contact. And then they end up sitting next to you like, when are you going to pet me? When are you going to talk to me? Dogs don't need constant petting and talking to want to be around somebody. They can start to learn to really like someone even when they start to crave their affection. So in some ways, make them work for the baby's love and affection. And dogs, they love people. A normal kind of mentally stable dog, they love people. So as soon as they know your child is people and that it's, not a wounded rabbit when it's making its crazy, crying, the first day, they're going to really like them. And then your worry is just going to be the overexcitement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell everybody that dogs are groupies and they will follow whoever they think is the most important person. And that's always the joke in dog training, right? It's like, oh, my father-in-law hates dogs. My father hates dogs. This person hates dogs. And the dogs just keep following them everywhere that they go. And I tell them because, yeah, that makes them interesting, right? If everybody else in this room is falling over to come to come see me, then I care about the person who's not. I care about who's not acting like the norm. And oftentimes dogs will give a ton of attention to whoever's not paying attention to them, more so than whoever's overexcited to see them.
Definitely great point, Nelson. And I think we've covered this so far, like the first week, the first month pretty well. And maybe we spend a minute about, just thinking about down the road. So once you get past the first couple weeks, everything's easy because your baby does nothing. And then all of a sudden, the things that might have been problems that you didn't address become a bigger deal when the baby can walk, crawl, run. I said that in a weird order, crawl, walk, run, but whatever. My dogs didn't have resource guarding issues, but if they did, that becomes a big problem, not on day 1, but on like day 365, right? When your kid starts moving a lot. So don't get false security where you're like, oh, this is great, everything's fine. Think through, what is it like when your kid runs, right? And that's going to happen. And trust me, I've got 3 kids. It happens out of nowhere. They can't do anything. And all of a sudden one day you're like, oh my gosh, they're walking. And then like no time later, they're like sprinting through the room and falling. And it happens so fast. And it happens too quick to give you time to like do a bunch of dog training to solve problems. Mm-hmm. So resource guarding, I would care about a lot. Adults don't generally go to a dog's bone all that often, right? So if you have a dog who has resource guarding and you're like, oh, it's not that big of an issue, I just don't touch him when he's got his bone. Well, guess what? Your kid's going to constantly, and they're going to go from the point of not being able to move to running over, trying to grab that dog's bone, or just running over to pet the dog and falling on their face while they're chewing the bone. That's going to happen, and it's going to come out of nowhere. So you need to address all resource guarding now. Like, hopefully now is you're either not pregnant yet or you're 3 months pregnant, and you've got time to fix all of that stuff and really work on it. And just imagine what will happen when a year-old child runs over and falls on the dog while they're chewing an antler or whatever bones they have. So work on that for sure. And then just think about, we talked about boundaries. I also have rules like that aren't just boundaries. I don't let my dogs wrestle in the house. And the reason for that is because I've got kids. Now their kids are getting older, but you get a kid who's just like learning to walk. And if you have big dogs that are like wrestling, they bump into the kid could easily get hurt, right? Crack their head on the fireplace or who knows what. So I don't let my dogs wrestle in the house for that reason. And before I had kids, it didn't really bother me. And then when I had young kids, it bothered me more. So we don't let that. We don't let them run through the house at all. But that doesn't mean they don't have a good life. They're out every day playing Frisbee, playing tug of war, like doing cool stuff. But that stuff happens outside, not in the living room.
That used to be the big one. So big one that I changed is Bryn would sprint in from the backyard into the house. And luckily she had a very good jump on her. So she would just hop over other dogs that were in her way or hop over any obstacles. But that was a big one that it was more important to stop her because she was so apt to do it, and it was hard to stop her in the moment. So I'd have to go and like clip her up at the door, right, and walk her nicely into the house so that she could just get used to walking in calmly. That was a big pain in the butt,
yeah.
But worth it, of course, right? Because she would have taken the kid out, no question.
For sure. And it just becomes a bigger deal, right? If you're 25, you don't have kids, you've got 2 dogs, and you're like, hey, it's cute. They run through the house, they growl, they play. That is kind of cute. And then you get an 8-month-old baby on the floor, and it's way less cute. And if you're trying to fix it then, it's going to be hard on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure there's a lot of things, listeners are probably wondering that maybe we didn't cover, specific questions. So definitely drop a comment and we will address them for you. Nelson and I have both done this with our own 3 kids, and then we've helped so many clients along the way. And Alex, our moderator, also has children and dogs too, so he's got a lot of experience here as well. So we've done this many, many times. So if you have questions, something you feel like we just, didn't cover at all or didn't go into deep enough, definitely ask. But I think maybe now, unless you've got more, we should move on to 60-second solutions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Any famous last words, Nelson?
No, I think
Okay.
the really, really good one is just start your training and make sure that your dogs are good before you bring your baby home.
I always cringe when we get the call from a new client and they're like, we were having a baby, our dog's got these problems, we need to address it. And then you're like, okay, when's the baby coming? And they're like, my wife's like 8 months, 9 months. Like, wait, so like a week from now? And, I hesitate to say this. I certainly won't say any names. So actually, I don't even know the name. But we got a call once from a client who the husband had called from the hospital. The baby had been born to set up training at home.
Oh, my goodness.
And his wife was probably going to kill him. She'd probably been telling him to do it for like 9 months.
Right.
He's like, honey, I got this. Don't worry about me. I'm responsible. I'll take care of this. And then like literally called from the hospital and like, hey, we need training to figure this stuff out. And well, I mean, of course, we'll help you at that point, but your life would be much easier if you call us before.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Alex, so with 60-second solutions, I know you've been making these up so far, but people, if you're listening and you want your question, concern, whatever on 60-second solutions, drop a comment. We would love to address this from you guys. So whatever you want to see us cover, tell us and we will make it happen.
And I would love for you guys to make my job easier.
Yes, for sure. All right. 60-second solutions. Who's up first?
I don't care.
Well, did you go first last time, Nelson?
Yes. I crushed it, by
So
the
I guess
way.
should I go first? Maybe I'll go first just to keep it fresh.
All right. So here we go. Covey, your clients just brought a baby home from the house. No, I'm kidding.
Like, I don't know. I have
He
no
got
idea
me
what
on
to
that
do.
one. I was like, what?
Haven't talked about that forever, have we? Okay. So Covey, for your first 60-second solution,
I'm nervous.
you
should
have walked into a house call and you can smell the accidents the dog's been having.
Okay, been there.
And that is why these clients called you. They cannot get their dog to quit peeing in the house. Just peeing. Pooping is going okay. Oh, and I got to get the timer.
Yeah, I'm getting free
here.
time here. This is awesome.
It is. Shoot. I'm gonna have to give Nelson a little bit here. All right. Ready, set, go.
All right. So this sounds boring, but we're going to talk for probably 30 minutes. There's so much I have to understand. How many accidents per day? And the client's going to say, I don't know, maybe, I'm not sure. It's hard to say. I'm like, well, 5, 100? Which one is it closer to? And I'm going to nail it down to some sort of number of accidents per day. I need to find out there's, like how often do you let the dog out? Without a doubt, I'm going to get them a potty log that they need to fill out. And it's going to be when the dog went outside, success or accident, or success or no. Every accident in the house, I'm going to stress to them, you have to catch them every time they go. I don't care how hard that is. If you don't catch them, it'll never get fixed. Use a crate if needed. Use a pen. You could also tether them to you. I don't love that, but it's an option. You have to prevent every single, or at least catch every single accident and then discipline it. But we need to know when it's happening, and that's what the potty log helps with, because a lot of times it happens in the afternoon when you're busy, when the kids are coming home from school, or some other time like that. The end.
Done.
Did the end
You
add
lost
any
your the
value
end.
to use my last second?
No.
So I have one critique that you didn't say.
Just one?
All of it was great. All of it was good info. But one thing I would have made sure to say is you need to get rid of that smell.
Yeah, I mean, I could get behind that. I'd clean your house.
If the dog smells pee, it's really hard to get them to stop. They think that's a place to go, and that's easier said.
How
than
is
done,
the
especially
critique
if there's
not
carpets.
correcting a dog?
Well, okay, I had a minute, guys. So this is super. I can't wait. I'm going to critique yours, Nelson. Like, here's 19 things. I'm going to take
Good
notes
luck.
while you're talking.
Good luck.
No, but for sure, it need to correct. And all joking aside, the biggest thing we do as trainers is ask so many questions, because we have to know. It's not, every case is not the same, so we need to understand when they're going. And the potty log is huge for you listeners. It's an absolute game changer.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it gives us the details we need.
And that's the hard part, right? And not to stay on this for too long, but the hard part is when I'm potty training in a house call, like, it's more talking and game planning than it is actual work, right? Like, I'm only there for an hour. And so, yeah, a lot of it is talking, and it can seem redundant of like, okay, but like, was it 2 or 3 today? Like, well, it was one of those. It was 2 or 3. Well, which one was it, right? I mean, it can seem very, very redundant, but yeah, when I'm only there for an hour, game plan and making everything as easy as possible for you to do is the most important part.
Do you guys ever feel the potty training house calls? I always feel bad because I'm not actively doing as much on any other house call. It's like you've got to get a good plan.
Mm-hmm. But we're going to pass some knowledge on and fix the issues. And I can't imagine living with a dog that's not potty trained, how stressful that must be. So
We've done it with house calls.
Yeah, for sure.
all right.
Okay,
Nelson's
Nelson, you
turn.
ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
All right, I'm gonna give him like 10 seconds.
Don't even need
'cause
it.
I gave it to you.
Don't even need it.
Okay, there we go.
Watch that
All
pass
right.
me in the butt.
Countdown timer up. Nelson, you have walked into a house call, and the clients say whenever their dog meets a new person out on a walk, wherever, the dog jumps all over the stranger. How are you going to fix it? Ready, set, go.
Okay, so first thing that we're going to do is teach the dog how to heel, right? I have to be able to calm it down, and then I'm not as crazy as pure positive people, and like you need to start 100 yards out, but I am going to make sure that I could walk that dog in very, very well populated places without anyone saying hi, and he remain calm, he or she, and that's the first step, right? If they can remain calm while being around people and no one saying hi, that's when we can start talking about, meeting people and greeting people. But things get a lot easier from there. If they're already calm, the chances of them jumping is already much less. And more so, if I have to correct it, it's not going to be crazy. The hardest part I've noticed for most clients is seeming rude. Right, they're not going to want to correct their dog or anything like that because, I love it, that kind of stuff. Don't let those people ruin your dog.
And you're done. House call over.
Still did it.
I don't know, Kelly. What do you think?
I mean, I've got a list of just some glaring things Nelson let off there. You never talked about making sure that everyone in public turns their back and says no jump. Guess that could fix it. How do you didn't even talk about the corrections for jumping? I mean, there's just so much, Nelson.
At least I mentioned them.
No, I mean, good answer. And I feel like we could answer that with just saying heel.
Yeah, no question.
You teach your dog to heel, that issue goes away. Because if you, like Nelson said, if you can heel past the person without the dog jumping on a sidewalk right past them, when you give them freedom, if they jump, it's going to be super easy to fix. It's going to be like a level 1 of excitement versus a level 10. So if you can heel right past them, as long as it's not aggression, as long as they're just jumping for excitement, the issue's gone once you can heel.
Avoid crazy people.
That does help. And I'm sure you listeners, there's so many people that you'll walk your dog and like the dog jumps and they're like, oh, I don't mind that he jumps, as you're trying to stop your dog from jumping or your puppy or whatever. And they're like, it doesn't bother me. I like it. But it's not something we want the dog doing. So it's fine that it doesn't bother you, but we need to stop him from jumping. All right. Well, I think this is a wrap. So before we sign off, just if you have questions, definitely drop them in the comments. We'd love to help you out. Hopefully this has been helpful for you, and definitely tune in for our next episode. Thanks for watching and listening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.